Hello, everyone. How's it going? Um, you obviously know what's going on. You've read the title. This is obviously not a video that I wanted to make um, for obvious reasons. Yesterday, my dog Max passed on. Um, the last pet I lost, I made a video about it. He passed, my cat passed a little more than a year ago. He passed on January 21st of last year. And here we are on February. Well, Max passed on February 4th yesterday, Monday. And sort of similar but different situations to what happened to my cat. First, I'm going to go into some background about Max. He was, rough. I think he was somewhere between 15 and 16 years old when he passed. I'm not sure of what his exact age was, but he was certainly an old dog. Um, so, a little background on how I got him. Uh, my parents split up in 2012, and Max was originally my parents' pet. But Max came into my home in 2013 when my mom very briefly lived here. Um, he came into my home in June of 2013. So I had him for right around 5.5 years, which ironically is pretty much the same amount of time that I had that cat for. Because I got the cat about a year, maybe about a year before I got this dog, and they passed about a year apart. So I got about the same amount of time um, with each pet. So that's how I got Max. Um, what was happening with Max is, his health was in decline for a while before he passed on. What was happening with Max is he was having mobility problems. He had some hip issues, and he had arthritis in back problems basically. So uh, he was on pain meds for it, and that helped quite a bit. He was able to walk, but he fell down a fair amount. He would just kind of tumble down a lot. But we would pick him up, and he'd walk on, right? And he was this way for quite a while before he passed on. I don't know if it was quite a year, but maybe it was. I'm honestly not sure when his mobility problems began, but he had them for quite a while, and we knew his health was declining because of his age. And in fact, me and my wife, we were having discussions about when we would have to make the decision to have him euthanized, because we knew that it was coming sooner or later. It was inevitable. But what happened to him was pretty unexpected, and of course, this seems to be what always happens with pets for some reason. We took him to the latest update about his health is right around a week ago. We took him to the vet. They did an X-ray on him. They did blood work. All the whole 9 yards. $170, of course, worth of a vet bill. And basically, what they discovered two pertinent things. One thing they discovered was he was, starting to have kidney problems. So what the vet suggested was basically dog food that's specifically formulated to address that issue. So, okay, fine. So I of course, I went on to, Chewy.com, and I was looking at the various dog food they had that addressed that issue, and they had, different sizes available. And I was like, well, I don't want to have to buy this stuff. And it's expensive dog food. And of course, the bigger the bag you get, the more you get for the money. So I'm like, well, I want to get them a bag that'll last a couple of months. So we ended up getting a 34-pound bag of dog food that cost $91. Right? So we ordered that, got delivered. Of course, he ate it because Max ate anything. The dog ate his own poop. And the poop of other things. So, not exactly a picky eater. So, we got the dog food in, and he's doing fine. The other thing that they discovered is they discovered a big mass in his chest by his heart and lungs, which was probably a cancerous tumor, that they discovered. So we knew it was there, and we knew we were on borrowed time with the dog. We knew at some point he would pass on. I mean, it was pretty obvious, but I had hoped, you always hope, right? I had hoped to have some more months with him. But that wasn't, to be the case. So yesterday, he was fine the vast majority of the day. I was on my way home from work yesterday, and my wife calls me, and she says, we've got a problem. Max can't walk. So, I was like, okay, well, I'll, see if I can, I was like, yeah, okay, well, I'll take a look at him as soon as we get home. We'll try to kind of assess the situation and take it from there, right? So by the time I got, because he was underneath the table. So by the time I got home, my wife had actually moved him to his pillow in the living room. He didn't walk there on his own. My wife basically moved him over to the pillow in the living room because he was under the kitchen table when she called me originally. Because what had happened is she had let him out to go to the bathroom in the backyard, and then brought him back in the house. And then after he came back in the house, he was not walking. And then, ended up on his pillow in the living room. So when I got home, I, looked at the dog, and, I mean, he was breathing very heavily. He was like, not entirely normally for him. But I have seen him breathe like that, before, because sometimes if he was like really stressed out or hot or something, he would sometimes breathe like that. So I was thinking, okay, maybe he's just stressed out. Maybe he's overworked. Give him a little bit of time, see how he does, right? So, after that, I eat dinner, and he's laying in the living room, kind of like looking over at us, like like begging for food indirectly. Of course he was begging for food. So, after dinner, excuse me, I went in there, and Um, I tried to help him up. Ooh, this is harder to do than I thought it would be. Um, went in there and lifted him up, and he couldn't walk because he couldn't. What the problem was on the his left side. He couldn't move his feet. Right, that was what was going on. So at that point, you know, what's funny is at that point we actually give him some chicken because, and of course he gobbled it right up like, the chicken. He just, right down the gullet, no problem for him. And so we so I immediately called the vet at that point and basically asked for suggestions about. I told him what was going on with his feet. And they asked me about the pills that he was on, and they said they would have the doctor call me back. And when they brought up the pills, I was like, well, maybe, because we had recently increased his dosage of painkillers because the vet said, hey, let's up his painkillers, right? So we did. And I was thinking, oh, well, maybe it's just the fact that we're giving him too much. Maybe we need to adjust how much medicine we're giving him. Maybe it's throwing off something in his nerves. Maybe that's what's going on, right? That was, at least that's what I was hoping for, right? So at that point, basically I just continued to sit with him and assess him. And then what happened is his breathing got a lot worse, and he became much more disoriented. He was in and out of it. He wasn't really even able to keep his head up at that point. He wasn't able to sit up. He was in and out of it. So, at that point, call the vet back and say, we just need to bring him in, right? And so they were like, okay. So at that point, we take the dog to the vet. And also, he was starting to lose his the color in his gums. He was was going white. So we took him to the vet, and he as he lost the color in his gums, the vet basically said it looked like internal bleeding, probably from the tumor. And he was really not able to lift his head, and you could tell his breathing was really labored at this point when we were at the vet. And the vet could have potentially done surgery, but they, didn't really recommend it. They said because of his age and the fact of where the tumor was, they said his odds of surviving that were fairly low. So, at that point, honestly, we chose to have him euthanized. And it was obviously a really hard choice to make, but it was clearly the correct one, given the circumstances. And wow, excuse me, guys. This is really hard to do talk about. So when we made that call, You know, they it's basically a two-step process. You know, we had to sign a consent form, and then after we did that, they came in. They did the first needle, which basically knocked him unconscious, and he was, you know, unaware of what was going on. And then after he was unconscious, there was the second needle, which, you know, ended his life. And you know, that's obviously the end of that story. So there you go. So what are my takeaways from this? I have a few, actually. Excuse me. And I can compare this directly with the experience of losing my cat, you know, roughly a year ago. This is, I actually thought about this. This is the 7th pet that I've lost over the course of my life. You know, and I'm only counting dogs and cats. I'm not counting the fish or the bird that I had. Just dogs and cats. This is the 7th one that I've lost so far in my life. So I was doing some thinking, you know, about it. And here's some things. These are just observations, general observations I have about it. After you lose a pet, nothing is ever the same again. You know, your life is much more empty when the pet passes versus, obviously, what it was before, right? There's a big difference. You know, in a negative way, obviously. But what happens after your initial, you know, rough time, like obviously I'm going through right now, you can tell from my emotional state. After your rough period that you have, what happens is, you know, you stabilize a bit and start to return to normalcy. And I know that's what will occur. I've gone through this enough times to know the process. But you're never the same afterwards. You always miss that pet. It doesn't matter if you have other pets or get another pet. You always miss the pets you lose. For, you know, always. So that's basically emotionally how it affects you long term. But the other thing I've learned is, you know, I think the reason we're willing to go through this, because I thought about it, I'm like, well, why do people, you know, go through this extremely traumatic, because you're setting yourself up for trauma, because this is, when you lose a pet, it's a very traumatic experience. And you say to yourself, well, why do I set myself up for this trauma? Why do this to yourself? Well, the reason for it ultimately is because of, you know, during the course of their lives, pets bring you so much, you know, joy and happiness, right? And the joy and happiness that they bring you is so much, right? It's a lot more than the grief. Well, Well, that's the reason you feel so much grief, right? It's because of what they bring you. That's why you're so upset when this happens. Man. So I think that's the reason people are willing to subject themselves to this. And the other thing that I've learned is that no matter how many times you go through this, it never gets easier. This is, you know, because what's interesting is I've lost 3 pets, as an adult, right? And 2 of the 3 pets, died on their own. A Chihuahua I had, he died back in 2013. He died on his own. My cat died on his own, right? And they both died really suddenly. Max did not die on his own. But the final decline came on really suddenly, and I knew, it was just boom. And no, he didn't die on his own, but it was obvious that it was his time. It wasn't a lingering decision that we didn't have to agonize over that decision for a long period of time. And here's what I've learned. And with Max, we had the most warning, I guess, of any of our pets. We had the most warning with Max. Like, we knew it was coming. We knew he was really old. We knew his health was in decline for a while. We knew all of these things. I mean, we knew it. We knew this would happen. So it didn't catch us completely off guard, but what I've learned is it really doesn't matter if it's completely, because with the Chihuahua we had, it was completely unexpected. It was just boom. We did not see it coming. It just was completely out of left field that it happened. And contrasting with this, when we kind of knew it was coming, it doesn't matter. It smacks you just as hard both ways. So the analogy that I would use is, like, let's say you get shot in the arm with a gun, right? The first time it happens, you don't know what to, it's an extreme shock. It hurts tremendously. I'm sure I've never been shot, but, I can't imagine it feels good. All of these things, right? It's horrific, yada, yada, yada. So the first time you get shot there, it's you don't know what to expect. I guarantee if, and then let's say you allow that arm to heal up, return to normal and normal functionality, blah, 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 you get shot in the arm again. I guarantee it's going to hurt you just as much as it did the first time you got shot in the arm. It's not going to hurt any less. It's going to be just as painful the second time as it was the first time, even if you know exactly what to expect. Let's say, the first time you get shot in the arm, you have no idea you're going to get shot in the arm. It just happens, right? And then the second time you get shot in the arm, you see the person pointing the gun at you, and you know you're going to get shot in the arm. You're not going to feel any better. That's just, to me, I think that's a good analogy for this. It doesn't matter if you've been through this before. It doesn't even matter if you know it's coming. It's still equally painful and equally traumatic, pretty much no matter what. At least that's what I've learned. There's no, quote, easy way to deal with this whatsoever. It's just basically, when it happens, it's it's just, what's important to remember is it is a trauma that you will survive, and in the end, it's worth it, because over time, what happens is you hurt less, but you never forget. The human brain is a wonderfully deceptive thing, because it allows you over the long term to only focus on the good things that the pet's brought to you. You forget, well, not entirely, but, you know, the pain and suffering you feel when they die is definitely lessened, and you remember all of the good feelings you had about the pet and all of the good things they brought into your life. So that's basically it. I've talked about this long enough, and if you watched this all the way through, I really appreciate it. I am going to disable comments on this. I do appreciate all the well wishes and everything that would inevitably flood in, but I'm just going to turn comments off for this video. I do appreciate all the good thoughts that I'm sure are out there for Max. You know, that's it. You know, oh, wait, one thing before I go. I don't expect you guys to sit through my last video if you're not interested in it. I did a 45-minute video Sunday where I talked about basically all the Star Trek characters and series and all that. And in that video, I mentioned that a puppy came into my yard, an adorable little pit bull puppy, less than a year old, I think. You know, just showed up in my front yard, right? And we ended up taking, and literally, this was Sunday when this happened. We had this puppy, and, you know, basically, we very briefly brought the puppy into the house. Max sniffed her butt and was totally cool with her. And my Chihuahua hated the puppy, but whatever. It's neither here nor there. And then basically we called around to try to figure out what to do with the puppy, and we found, you know, the local no-kill animal shelter has like basically a 24/7 drop-off. So that's where we took the animal. We took her to the shelter and dropped her off Sunday. So it's a bit ironic that the day before Max dies, a puppy is briefly in our home. That is just one hell of a coincidence, to put it mildly. Because in the 11 years, well, nearly 11 years I've lived in this house, I've never had a puppy just show up in my front yard before. So that was quite, you know, strange dichotomy there. And the other thing that's, quote, at least a note for me is I'm now down to only having one pet. I still have, we have one dog, a Chihuahua, and that's all we have now. And what's interesting about that, at least, well, not interesting, but life-changing for me, it's it's been about 7 years since I've only had one pet. You know, because back in 2012, you know, we got that cat, so we had my quote original Chihuahua and the cat in 2012, right? And then in 2013, my mom moved in, brought Max, so then we had my original Chihuahua, we had Max, and we had the cat, so we were up to 3 pets at that point. And then my original Chihuahua, Patches, died only about a month or so after Max came into the house. He just died. And then we were down to 2 pets, and then after my mom left, about 2 or 3 months after my mom was gone, we got our current Chihuahua. And so we were back up to 3 pets. And then when JJ died, we were down to 2. And now we're back down to 1. We have no plans to get any more pets whatsoever. You know, until our current one passes on eventually. My current dog, the Chihuahua, he's about 8 years old, so with any extreme luck, I've got another, you know, several years before I have to go through this again. You know, I know obviously eventually it'll happen to him, but hopefully not for a long time, I'm hoping. You know, if he lives a normal dog lifespan of, you know, 14, 15 years, hopefully I've got 6 or 7 years before I have to go through this shit again. So anyway, that's it. Thanks so much for watching all the way through. I'll see you guys next time on a happier note.